different today because I can't seem to decide what I'm doing, which is fine, I hope. I'm going to be basically working Microsoft Access. This is what I've been doing at work recently, so I figured, hey, why not do more? If the camera quality looks a little bit lower than it normally is, that has to do with the fact that I'm using my higher quality camera with the light that it comes with, because it comes with a light. For this image here that you see with all the paper. It's still not super great, but it is what it is. I don't have all of the necessary equipments for it. But you get the idea. Now I'm just setting some of my the things. Okay, all right. So Microsoft Access is a program I've been working on quite a bit, as you can tell by the description of this video, and you know, I've gotten pretty adept at it, and it's not actually that hard. That's one of the things that you need to understand. This is not that hard to work in. There's some front loading that you got to do depending on what you're trying to design, and that's actually what I want to go through first. So we're just gonna you know, get right into it and show sort of the thought processes, right? So one of the things to consider here is that you really want to front load the database, because that's what we're making. We're making a database more so than anything. So this is going to be a budgeting software, right? So I want to be able to track budgets, where my money's going, how it's being spent. There's, you know what? If you are looking for a budgeting software, don't do this. You know, there are a ton of great budgeting softwares out there. One that I've used in the past is YNAB, You Need a Budget, and that's good. I just, for me, need to make my own thing because I want to be able to do whatever I want with it and mess with the daters and all that stuff. So that's why I'm doing this, and I figured I'd do it live online, because why the heck not? Why the hey not? So when you're designing a database, first thing you have to think of, and you have to go through the thought processes here of the data. So what data am I tracking, and why am I tracking it? And you have to decide what that data structure is going to look like. So what you really have to do is you have to break down like, what are the important parts of the data? What do you need to track, and what do you not need to track, right? Because let me give you this example here. Okay, I'm going to pull up an Excel spreadsheet, right? Let's pull it up over here. So I've got my, come on. Display capture, there we go. So I'm just going to pull up an Excel spreadsheet here. So let's say I'm making a budgeting software, and I could do this on an Excel spreadsheet, but that's too easy. So what am I going to have? I'm going to have debits. I'm going to have credits. I'm going to forget which is which. Don't worry about it. I'm going to have my running total. I'm going to have, you know, where the expense is, and I want to have what kind of expense, right? What kind of expense? All right. It's spent. Doesn't matter. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So, you know, debits are going to be, oh, I got $600, and then I got $700, and credits, okay, and then where? Well, I got that from work, and I got that from a contract. You know, you put those in there, and then my running total is, you know, it's going to be equal to, you know, all of that. It's going to be equal to the sum of all of that, right? So that's going to be my total here, except that it can't be that. What it has to be is, right now I'm designing it, an actual budgeting software on Excel. If you want, you could just use this. So it's actually going to be that, except I want the E4 to stay and the F4 to move. So E4 has to stay, F4 has to not stay. So when I do that, it's just going to be my running total, right? Because the dollar signs basically mean that it's not going to stay. So as you can see, as I work my way down here, it's including more, but you know, every time I pull up you can see it's going to get bigger and bigger, right? Okay, so I spent 20 bucks, and then I spent 30 bucks, and then I spent 50 bucks. So you can see those totals are staying because it's the top one is only grabbing the part. Anyways, I got a hamburger, I got a tool, and I got too much toilet paper, okay? And then what kind of expense is it? Well, in this case, it's income, so we can say regular income, and then we can say irregular. I could come up with better terms if I cared. Regular income, and then we got food. Fool. We're having fun. All right, food. House tools, sure, whatever, and then household goods, house goods. Okay, so now I've got, this is the basic starting of a budget. I started with $0, so I didn't need a starting balance. Let's add a starting balance. So we're not gonna add a starting balance. That's fine. Okay, and you know what? I probably want date as well. Okay, so the date of the transaction. So 02 2 2-3, 2-3, 2-4, 2-5. Okay, cool. 2-5. 2-5. Thank you. Okay. So, we've got the startings of a budget program here. And I could use this, and this could be effective in tracking how much I'm spending. And then what I would do is I would just, build a table here. Sorry. Table here that would have all the, food, tools, goods, regular income and irregular income, and then this just could be the sum of those, and I could use a rather complex but quite copyable format of Excel thing that would basically just, oh yeah, it's in there, okay, I'm gonna add that on there. I could even use, comma. Anyways, the point that I want to get to here is it would be possible here, but we can't do as much. We also need to watch out for, when we're building tables, we can't build it like this, okay? And I'll tell you why. First of all, when it comes to making tables in a database, you want to ostensibly make them as small as possible, and you don't want there to be information that relies on other information. So what does that mean? That basically means that I shouldn't have pieces of data that could be figured out using other pieces of data I already have. That's good for an efficiency reason. It's good for a consistency reason. So let's look at what information I can get rid of that I shouldn't actually need to have if I'm building a database, okay? So first of all, running total. Well, do I need running total? Well, you know what? Let's not do that. Let's start at the top. Okay, date. Do I need date? Well, yes. There's no other way for me to derive that information. It could be when I enter it in, and databases do have timestamps, which basically means that it's going to track, when it will know what the most recent entry is to a point, but not reliably. So yeah, we want to have the date in. Now, where that money was spent, who the payer or the payee was. Well, yeah, we kind of want to have that because that's going to, inform us on where the money's going, and we're going to be able to use that as a data analysis tool to see where the money's being spent. So we definitely want to have that. Debits and credits. So yes and no, okay? So we obviously we need this information, right? With 100% we have to have this. This is the transactions. This is the meat of the data. This is what we're actually trying to track. And I hope Nessie's picking me up just fine. I should be, yeah. So this is the information we need to be tracking. But what we need to do is we need to realize that these are the same data, right? Money going in and money coming out, they're the same data. And if we have them separated, first of all, we're creating a bunch of extra fields and things that we have to deal with. We have to worry about where it's getting entered in. The only difference between a debit and a credit is the direction of the money flow, positive or negative. Well, that's already factored into the actual math of it. It's minus $20. We already know it's a credit, right? So we don't need to worry about tracking credits and debits separately. So that actually simplifies that, right? That's all derived information. We know which one it belongs to based on information that exists within the data. So we don't need to worry about having them separate. Makes it a lot easier when we're adding things together. Our queries are going to be a lot less and a lot less complicated if we all have them in the one field. Now, sometimes that can create limitations, right? When you collapse things, it can create limitations that make the development more difficult down the road. I don't think this is one of those cases, but 99 times out of 100, that is a worthy trade-off, because the efficiency in which your system is going to run, it's going to run faster. That means it's going to be more scalable. That means it's going to create less work down the road. So while certain solutions may be more complicated, and there might be an argument to be said, well, if we keep them separate, then when we're pulling credits versus debits, we have completely different fields. You just pull all of that field, as opposed to trying to pull from debits the negative numbers, which technically is a little more complicated, but we can deal with that by creating functions for repeated, transaction types, not types of transactions, but transactions with the database. So again, we'll probably see that perk a little bit more as we continue on, but for now, you'll have to trust me, this is much better. Okay, next thing, running total. So as we can see here quite clearly, while the running total is something that we do want to have the information of, we're already just deriving that. We're already just figuring that out based on the information we have. So no, we don't need running total, okay? So that's out, okay? What kind of expense? Now, this is an interesting one because there's a number of, I had to think through this for a bit. And I did front load some of the thought before coming on live. So what kind of expense is it? So we could have that field, and we certainly do want to, because we want to be able to track the types of expenses that we have. We want to be able to codify the expenses, right? Because even if we're buying two things from the same place, if I go to a corner store and I buy $30 of gas and $20 of snacks, I don't want them all going under gas. So I want to be able to separate them out, right? So that way we do need to track it. Now, I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit here. That, however, is not going to be one of the fields in my transaction table. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because we want to be able to put multiple tags on the same item. Now, there's two ways to do that, but I'm going to get into that. But for now, that will be a field, but it won't be in our transaction table, but it will be related to the transactions, and I'll show you that, and we'll get into a little bit of relational database management. Right now, as you can see on the page I made here, what tables am I going to have? Okay, so I'm going to have the transaction table, and that's going to have my transaction ID. So that's basically made to be, and you're shaking, and I'm sorry, a primary key, and I'll explain what those are when I'm putting the database together, okay? So that's a primary key. Well, then we have the transaction amount. Well, that's pretty obvious what that is. That's how much money is moving, right? And then we have the account. Forgot about that one. So we want to, for sure, be tracking different accounts. Know where our dollars are. So we need to know what account that's in. So in, pardon me. In the case of an Excel spreadsheet, if I was to do that, no, that was the right one. Yeah, it just takes a second because reasons, I guess. Gotta make that come up again every time. There would be a few ways to do this in an Excel sheet. You could do something like this where it sums it up, but what you would probably actually end up doing in an Excel spreadsheet is you would have either different tables or different tabs for different accounts. So this could be spending, and this could be saving, and this could be for vacation, and we just basically do the exact same thing on each tab, and then we would have a summary tab, right? So we'd go here and we'd go summary, summary, Sure. Where we would basically say, okay, what's our total balance? Total balance is going to be equal to, you know, right, these guys plus these guys plus these guys, but what we need to do is we need to sum them, because if we don't, we're trying to add arrays together and Excel's gonna get upset with us because that's not what arrays are for. That's not how arrays work. So we have to hold its hand, and look, we got $3,600. That was easy. We're already making money. I got a little excited there, didn't I? Okay. So yeah, accounts. That's one way you could do accounts, and obviously you'd have more stuff here. And if you wanted to, you know, transfer over the types and do, you know, mess around with stuff, that gets really messy when you start to get to that level in Excel. That's one of the reasons why I'm not doing it in Excel. You could do it more manually with Excel and just manually transfer things over and figure it out that way, which is a lot simpler and a lot easier to do. That's not how I work. I like to front load all my information and then just float through the rest of life. So I'm not going to do that. We're not going to look at that. We're going to look at, you know, Excel or Access. So anyways, okay, accounts and then payee payer. All right. So that's our where, right? Payee payer. So that's our transaction table. That's all we want. That's all we want to track. Now, could you come up with, you know, more things as to, you know, types of data put in there? It's definitely possible. I try to do as little as possible. We can add more later if we need to, because adding fields to tables usually doesn't make a huge issue. Removing them can, because it'll break things, because you'll have queries or transactions or you know, interactions with a database where you're asking for information that are now suddenly asking for information that isn't there. So we'll start minimalist. We can add things if we need to, but that's pretty good. Now, the second thing you can see here is I've got my tags table. Okay, so I'll touch on this real quick, but we'll get into it. It's much easier to explain. If you see, is that the tags, I want to have multiple tags per. So for database reasons, and I'll show you, we need to have a separate table that connects to the transaction ID. So you can see here's a transaction ID, here's a transaction ID. They are basically going to be the same thing, but just connected through what's called a relationship in a relational database. It's going to allow us to basically keep a list of tags connected to the type of expense that it is, right? So if we look here I can go, okay, regular income, you know, or maybe this is food, but it's also fast food, you know, but it's also, no, that would be okay. Food, fast food, maybe this is tools, but it's also, I want to file it under household goods as well. I want to know how much, I'm considering this a household good, but I also want it to be considered a tool, right? So, you know, multiple tags, because things can fall under multiple categories. You know, food, fast food, food, health food, you know, there could be multiple ways you want to categorize things to truly understand what you're purchasing. So in this case, I'm doing with commas. Now this seems pretty great, right? This seems pretty great. I can just, you know, have them all listed in there, and I don't really have to worry about it, do I? So if I go household goods here. So then what I could do is, oh, well, I'll show you why this doesn't work. Well, I want to see my total for everything that's household goods, okay? So let's go, I want to look up X lookup, my apologies, X lookup. Come on, just, you know, Excel, this is why we're not friends. So X lookup, that guy, so my lookup value is going to be, what I want it to be is household goods, okay? So I want it to be, or sorry, house goods is what I put it as. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, house goods, I'm looking up house goods, and I'm looking here, and I'm returning from here, so to get my total, okay? So perfect, that's it, that's all I need. Boom, okay, minus 50, hold on, that's not right. Right, because what's happening is it's looking for house goods. This is tools, comma, house goods. That's not the same thing. So, I mean, I can, you know, add some wildcards in here. I think this is how this works in Excel. Nope, this is not how this works in Excel. There's ways that you can change it, and I don't want to get too much into it because we're not actually working in Excel today. But, you know, I can change it so that it could find if there is house goods. Oh, you know what? I just realized that S is not there, but it didn't change anything. I can even just copy this to show you for certain. There, see, didn't change anything. So there's ways we could make that work, and we could have a search for multiple things in there. But that gets messy, and it gets harder to search and differentiate things. But you know what? Let's just get into Access. Let's start building our tables, and I can get a little bit more into there. So here's Access. Here's Access. Here's Access. Here's Access. Yay! All right, so we're just gonna start with a blank database. Literally nothing, and we're just gonna call it budget. So I'm not gonna put any real numbers in here, obviously. But okay, and we start with table 1. I don't like. No, it's if we could. I want to unmaximize this table. I want to. Okay. Well, you know, I'm gonna close this, and the way I like to do is I like to go straight into design view. So table design. All right. So we're making our field names, and this way I get a little bit more control over the at least the first field, right? I don't have to go and change things. But anyways, so let's go straight into design view. We're creating a table. Okay, so our first field. So there's when you're building with databases, there's one thing that you need to understand is that you always need to have what's called a primary key. So the primary key is a value, not necessarily a number, but a value that has to be unique, completely unique, 100% of the time, no exceptions. And that's how the database knows how to file the information. Now, I shouldn't say that. You don't necessarily have to have a primary key, but for anything that's holding data that you want to track, again, examples is going to be a better way to show you. I'll show you the kinds of table that don't need a primary key a little bit later, but for the most part, you absolutely have to have a primary key. So that the default is you need a primary key. Now, in this case, as you can see listed here, we've got transaction ID. What are our potential primary keys? Looking at our notes here. Okay, so transaction ID. Let's pretend I didn't have that here. Let's pretend I hadn't thought of that, because that's going to be the learning lesson here. So transaction amount. Okay, that cannot be the primary key. We're going to have duplicates. I'm going to spend $20 exactly, more often than once ever. Also, we're going to end up with many transactions that would have similar, so that can't be a primary key. How about account? No, I'm literally using that to track which account things are going into, so absolutely can't. So payee, payer, all right? No, I'm going to interact with people more than one time. So if we're just going with the data that I'm tracking, then I don't have a primary key. So now we're going to basically say, okay, well, we have to have a primary key. Let's just make one up. So this is why everything has transaction IDs, so transaction numbers. You see it everywhere, all the time. It's such a plain thing that you didn't even think it was weird when you saw it there. I don't think anyways. Because you're just, well, yeah, things have to have a transaction ID. That's why. Because it's a primary key that we need to differentiate it from everything else. Now, this is necessary for relational databases. I think this is probably a concept that existed before databases, just to have numbers on things. It just kind of makes sense. But anyways, that's going to be our transaction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, and this won't come up until we get into sort of the coding side of it. But there's different types of variables. Now this one, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to start it with a lowercase I, and then we're going to go transaction ID. Okay. So why does it start with that I? Because it's an integer. I'll tell you why it's an integer. But first, our data type. Now for access, they give us this very, very convenient thing called an auto number. And we're going to use, it's going to save us so much trouble down the line, because what it does is it basically, every time it makes a new transaction, every time we make a new transaction, it's just going to give it a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just going to, we can't change it. It won't let us change it. You know, and so it's a wonderful tool. It makes things super easy. You can't always use it, dependent on you know, as a primary key, dependent on whether your primary key needs to be tracked in conjunction with something else, you know, in connection with something else. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, in this case, auto number is perfect, because all we need is a number that the system will understand. That's all we need. So this is perfect. All right. So our description is literally transaction ID for each transaction. And I'm going to name this as a surrogate key. That's not an important term. You can look that up if you'd like. It basically means it's a made-up thing. There's no data associated with it. It's literally just there to be the primary key. Now, one other thing I'm going to do, so if we look down here, field size is a long integer because there's not going to be any decimal points, and we want to make sure it can go long. One thing I am going to do, we're going to go into our format here. No, not that. Going to go a whole bunch of zeros, because we go into our datasheet view. Yes, I want to save this. This is going to be our transactions table. Sorry. Lowercase t, transactions. Okay. There's no primary key defined. Do you want to create a primary key now? Yes. Okay. So we go back to our design view. Okay, so that's the primary key. So that's great. Okay. So next up is the transaction amount, or the, trying to think of a better way, but I'm going to, okay, lowercase d. So that's for a double, which, let's go through some of the data types just real quick here, real quick. So when you're making your table, obviously you want to tell it what kind of information it's getting, because you know, every field is going to be different as far as how the system needs to interact with it and what kind of data you're trying to interact with, right? So we've already looked at a transaction ID is what's called an integer. So an integer is basically just, it's a non-decimal number. Now in Access, there's a few different types of integers. It doesn't actually change how the system interacts with it, but it does change the field size, which is just going to be something that changes how long things take to process and that. So you usually want to cut it a little close, but not too close that, you know, it's not expandable down the line. Don't worry about that. So an integer. So basically any number, 1,000, 1,000,000, obviously with the actual zeros instead of the letters, and you know, any number that does not include a decimal. As soon as you are 1.1, you are not in integer anymore. You are now in double land. So a double is a number that has a decimal point. That's the long and short of it. Same thing, just decimal points, right? So there's also a single and a float, and there's you know, single, float, or all types of numbers with decimal points. The more data you need to hold on something, or okay, let me put it this way. If I'm writing on this piece of paper, and I know that I need to write something that's 8 characters or less, then I know I'm going to take up this much space. So if I have a line with this much space in it, it's going to take up this much space, this much data, this much information, right? If that's going to double, if I'm going to go to single, double, 16, from 8 to 16, then I know I'm going to take up this much space. So I'm now taking up this much space. So if I use a double where a single would do, I'm taking up significantly more space than I need to. And that's no good, right? Because it's all about efficiency. It's making things run faster. Is it necessary for me to care about that in making a budgeting software for myself? No, no, no. It's never going to get that big. Well, I mean, you know what? If I use this thing for 5, 6, 7 years, it might end up mattering, right? So I'll be glad I did these things. But I like doing things to the best efficiency, even if I don't have to. So we're going to make sure that on this we're dealing with a smaller number because I don't plan on making any multi-million-dollar transactions. So I'm going to put my pen back over here. So now I'm still going to call it a double because that's just what I'm used to. So small d for double, small I for integer. And I'll tell you why we're doing this a little bit later. Again, once we get into the coding, you'll understand why you do these sort of leading things. It's the same reason we have a small t in front of the transactions table. Okay. But, okay. Double. See, now, naming things is important. It's important. So now I'm kind of stuck on figuring out a name for this. See, I could just do transaction. I could do amount. I could do credit, debit. I'm just going to go with amount. So we're just going to go D, amount. Now, this is where we need to select our data type. So for access, what you have to do is you have to pick number, not large number. We're not dealing with a large number here, which is nice. Number. Now, this starts at long integer. I'm going to go with single. Okay? Because a single, if we see here, the most common settings are double and long integer. If this field will be joined to an auto number field, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so we don't need to worry about that. We don't need to use a long integer. So I just want to see, out of curiosity, let's find out what double versus single. Okay, so if we pull this across here, we can see. Okay, access double versus single. So, yeah, that's pretty big. Negative, so 3.4 times 1038. So, and up to 7 significant digits. Storage requirement is 4 bytes, so double is up to 15 significant digits. Okay, so we know we're dealing with money. We know we're dealing with the decimal point, but it's only ever going to have 2, right? It's only going to have 2 numbers after the decimal point, which means that I will be able to deal with 5 pre-decimal point numbers. So do we need to worry about the using a double as opposed to a single? Well, let's see. So we also have to consider we're dealing with cumulative wealth, right? I may want to do something like put my condo in there as an asset, right? So 0.00, that's important. So what is that? 3, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we're already at 7, or we're at 8, and whereas according to the internet, that was not enough. So you know what? We're actually going to go with a double. So it's going to recheck those things, right? So number, double, input mass capture format. We want that to be in a currency format. So doing that here just makes it a little bit easier to deal with down the road. Okay, so I enjoy that. Now, we always want 2 decimal points. I don't actually have to update anything because we haven't done anything yet. That's why I like setting these things ahead of time, so you don't have to worry about hoping whether it disseminates down to all of the other things you've done properly, right? Okay, so 2 decimal points. Input mask, we're not going to worry about that. Caption, that one I actually have to do. I forget that sometimes. But anyways, first I'm going to do a description. Is basically going to be transaction amount, right? Okay. Now the other thing too is it required? Yes. There's no point in having a transaction if there's nothing going. Indexed? Absolutely not, for all the reasons that it's not a primary key. We're not indexing this one. Validation rule. Not as long as you put a number in there, it's fine. I mean, we could set up a validation rule that you can't do anything smaller digits. You know what? Let's actually do that. So we're going to go. I believe I can go like 0.0. I think that's gonna work. It might not. We might have to come back to this. And our caption is going to be debit/credit. Again, this helps us a lot later when dealing with the transactions and dealing with the forms and things like that. Pardon me. Okay, now we got to come back to transaction ID because I got to do the caption. So we're just gonna go trans ID because it's gonna be a small field and I know what the headings. I don't want to have to change the heading every time. So index, yes, obviously no duplicates. We're dealing with a primary key. That's what we need to do. New things, increment, not random. No, we want to increment. That just makes sense. Okay, next up, what are we looking at? So the account that it belongs to. Now, I had thought, I had the idea as to have them in different tables. So one of the ways that we could have gone at this is we could have had each account be a different table, okay? Which it would work. It would be a little less maneuverable, right? Because by having an accounts field, what I'm able to do is I'm able to have I can just create accounts very easily. It's not difficult. It's much more difficult to create a whole new table, and then you'd have to re-reference everything. So that'd be something you'd have to do on the back end. But by making the accounts, I mean, you could do that. It's just more difficult, right? So, so now with having the accounts be a field, I'm still able to limit it. I'll show you how I'm going to make a source table that will mean you can't just put whatever you want into this field. It's going to be limited to the list of what accounts you have, and it's something that's referenceable, right? So I'm dealing with one less table. It makes the interactions a lot easier. So yeah, that just makes things a lot easier by having it as a field in here, and we can always make our transactions. I'm using more complicated words than I need to. We can always use our interactions with the database to be more in sync. I'm losing it here. Give me 2 seconds. So what we can do is, we can just use pull the information based on which transaction to give ourselves different tables and different views. So that's all stuff we take care of on the back end. So it's not going to look like a jumbled mess because we're going to make it not look like a jumbled mess, right? But this is just a better way to do it to make it more malleable and make it more manipulatable for us, okay? Again, you might have to take my word on that. You'll see later in examples as we do that. But for account, now there's 2 ways I could go by account. I could have an account number, right? Have it referencing an account number, or I could have it referencing an account name. Or I could have it do both. Because a number is going to be cleaner and easier to work with on scaling, right? Whereas a name, it just takes away some steps if I allow it to do a name, because I am going to want names associated with the account. Pardon me. Whew. But I also probably want it to, again, be numbers, because that's just can be easier to work with sometimes. I hadn't thought this far ahead. I'm just gonna go with names, because if I was making this for someone else, or to be scalable to multiple people, I don't know why people would want to be connected to the same budgeting software. I guess if a family kind of thing, then I would do numbers, but I'm not doing that. So I'm gonna go with just with the names, which means we're dealing with our first string. What's a string, you ask? Anything that isn't a number or a date. It's kind of the easiest way to say it. There's other exceptions. I don't think we're going to run into any booleans, so we don't have to worry about that. But yeah, string is basically just words. So we're just going to go account. Short text, I don't need it to be long. You know what? I'm going to limit these to 15 characters. So you won't be... Oh, yeah, you can't see. Oh, geez, there was a bunch of that stuff that was cut off. That was unfortunate that you guys couldn't see that. Not that I think you can see it super great, but... so field size, 15 I'm going to go with. It started off as 255, which is the standard, but I don't need 255 characters for an account number. I really don't. So we're going to make it easy. It's going to be 15. Is that create limitations? Yes. Do I care about those limitations? Not really. For an account number, string, whatever. It's fine. I know it's just short text here. That's because they have short text and long text. But we're going to go with string. Is what they're called, generally speaking. And we'll see that in the code later when we work on that. So what's our description for this one is going to be account transaction is on. Beautiful. And then our caption is going to be account. Beautiful. We don't need a format. We don't need an input mask. We don't need any validation rules. Is it required? Abso-frickin-lutely. There has to be an account. Moving on. Okay. Payer/payee. I don't know. Again, this is going to be a string for all the same reasons. Actually, for very different reasons than the account, because we're referencing information about it that's like real life information. You know, Wendy's, Arby's. Well, I'm all going with food places. IKEA, paycheck, things like that, right? So our actual payee. So I'm just going to go payee. I mean, payer, payee, whatever. It's going to be one of the two. And when we're spending money, it's like a negative payee, which I guess would be payer, because we're the payee. I don't actually know which is which, but I'm just going to go with payee because of the double E. It's more fun. So again, we're going with a string. Do I want to limit it to 15? No, 15's a little short for what we could want to put in here. There could be some rather long business names or something. So we're just going to go with 30 characters. I think 30 characters, pretty fair. A tweet's 140, and sometimes people get way too much in those. So we're going to go with 30 characters, which works for us. We don't need to format. We don't need to input mask. We don't need a default value. Is it required? Yes, it's required. We need to know this information, or else things are going to break. We don't want nulls. And our description, of course, is whom we are paying or receiving from. And then our caption is going to be pay, and we can change that when we need to, which is fine. So, because it's not set in stone, right? Okay, so we're done our first table. Booyah. Okay, so we're going to go to our actual table view. Yes, I'd like to save the table. Okay, so we can see here our transaction ID says new. You'll see how that works in a second. Debits, credits. Because of the format, you know, we've sort of got that set up. Let's make sure I can do 200. I cannot, which is fine, because all we need to do is go back to our... Okay. Go back to our design view. A few things went wrong here. And I was struggling with the data validation rules at work the other day. So this actually doesn't surprise me. And then this guy should actually be... This is going to be wrong. This isn't going to work. I hate not having leading zeros. I have no other objects. I don't know why I would do that. I hate not having leading zeros. So, yeah. The data validation rules are weird. Oh, right, because I think I want this to say like that. Why is like in the brackets? Oh, that's format. The format should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll say 10 letters. See, that's just mean. 20 is not gonna let me do that. See, and that just does 3. Now you'll notice that as I'm doing this, the transaction number is going up even though the IDs aren't being saved. That's just how auto numbers work. There is a way to reset them. I know this because I've been shown on somewhere, but I've never really looked into it. So, and now we do what every good programmer does. We're just gonna search on the internet to get our answer here. So access format leading zeros. Access format leading zeros. Let's see here. Go to the format line, and apparently I just need to put zeros. So I think the problem was I put them in a string. When you put something in quotes, you're basically telling it you need to be a string. 20. Okay, good. That's what I wanted. Excellent. Okay. But we still need to fix our debit credit. So what I'm doing here is if I hit escape, it just deletes what I did. If I hit escape again, it's like, oh, never mind. It's kind of like an undo. It's like, oh, never mind. You never made that, except you're still going to increment the auto numbers to deal with that. What if we go 0.00? What if I just do zeros? Nope, doesn't like that. What if I do like 0.00? Oh, that's Ike 0.00. No, not like 0. Like, yeah, okay. And then we go to the internet again, because that's where we get all of our answers. We just type in access. You can't see the screen, but this is what's happening. I'm just typing in access validation rule. And this is how you can do this too. Validation rule. Let's just type in what I want, 0.00. What is the validation rule? Restrict data input by using validation rules. Yeah, okay, that's fine. And we're just going through the field looking for what's going to give us the answer. And you know what? I could just do greater than. So what I'll do... No, that doesn't work because I need to make sure that there's no decimal points after. Oh, you know what? I've already dealt with that. I'm an idiot. Okay, great. It won't let me do it. Watch. Watch. This kid, you know. So if I go 20.22222. Right. I must enter into account. Blarg. And the payee is blarg. Blarg. Okay, so there we go. So we can see here it accepted it. Okay. I'll deal with that later. Because I want to get to the other table, but that's fine. So there we go. We have a transaction. Beautiful, wonderful us. Now, I can just enter things into here, but we're going to make a form, but we're not going to do it right now because I want to make my second table. So, my second table, we're going to go right into our design view again, because that's how I prefer to do it, is going to be tags, our tags table. So, what we want to do with this is we basically want to make a table that's going to connect to this table and say, for each transaction ID, these are the tags for that transaction ID. So the reason that we have to do this is that the if you look at this table, this other table we made here, if I had a field called tags, I could only put one value in there. Now we could do the trick with commas. That just makes things incredibly difficult later. So I can only have one tag per item. That's a limitation on it. But if I make this table to have the tags, then I don't have to worry about it. Now I can have as many tags per the transaction that I want, which is perfect. So what do we need to do that? Well, we need a field to match up, and that's where we have the transaction ID. And everything is true on the internet. Yes, everything is true in the internet. Even the wrong stuff, especially the wrong stuff. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to make it so they both have a transaction ID that can be matched up. All right, so what I want to do here is I want to have the exact same. So I'll go back into my design view here. For me, I like naming things exactly the same So we're going to transaction ID. And we need to make sure that it matches up. So what we actually need is we need this to be a number, and we need it to be a long integer, because that's what auto numbers are. They're long integers. So it needs to be the same data type, because there can't be a value that exists in our transaction table under the transaction ID that does not exist under our tags table. Strike that, reverse it. There can't be a value in the tags table that isn't in the transactions table. There's a limitation that's created because you need to be able to reference those for this to work, right? Okay, so data type number, long integer, great. I'm just gonna steal this here. Actually, can I don't even know if I can copy and just paste that right in there. Yeah. Okay, boom. There, it's exactly the same. Beautiful. Indexed, yes, no duplicates. Now, you would think that would be the primary key, right? But it can't be, because I want to have multiple tags for it. So, we'll start right here, string tag. It's going to be a short text. I don't need it to be a million miles long. And this is tags for each transaction. And I think next time I run this, and I'm gonna cut this off soon. I've been going almost for an hour now. Next time I run this, I'm gonna get into why tags why tags are such an important concept that just makes manipulating data significantly easier, a little bit more dangerous as far as the way you have to handle it, but it makes it so much easier to interact with data. And the concept of tags is actually a very interesting one, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But we're going to finish this. So tags for each transaction, field size. Do I need 255 characters? I don't need 255 characters. So we're going to go with, I'm going to go unnecessarily high with this. I'm going to go 30 characters, because who knows what I'm going to want to put in there. So could I do with 20? Probably. I'll do 30. That way I can get stupid later if I want. Format, nothing. Input mask, no. Caption, default value, no. Required, absolutely, yes, it is required. Thank you for asking. Indexed, no, that's fine. Allow zero length, no, it's got to be something in there. Okay. So now, as I was saying, anytime you have a database that's relational, you need to have a primary key. Now, here's the problem. Right now we've got our transaction ID. Well, we know we're going to have that in here multiple times, because that's how we're matching it up with our transaction table. That's how we have multiple keys, or that's how we have multiple values, because that transaction ID will be listed for every time there's a tag that I want on there. But we're also going to have multiple tags, right? So we're going to have the tags in there, and there will be multiple transactions that have the same tag. So right now, we're dealing with a situation where, well, there can't be a primary key between the two values that we have. Now, we could go the transaction route, where we just add, again, what's called a surrogate key, right? We can go with a transaction route that's going to add a surrogate key. It basically means it's a meaningless number that just, is referenced to that particular item. We could do that. Alternatively, we can do... I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it's basically like a conjoined key, because we are never going to have an instance where a transaction will have the same tag twice. Or at least we shouldn't. And we should avoid that. So what we can do is we can do a conjoined key here. So I'm going to select them both, and they are now a primary key together, because there's never going to be an instance where we will have duplicate transaction ID along with a duplicate tag. So that saves us another field. That saves us, some more data, some more searching. They're now both indexed. Even though I said not indexed before, it's now needs to be indexed. Yes, duplicates okay. And this one, indexed. Yes, duplicates okay. So we need to set it so that we can have duplicates, because we need to have duplicates. But that's fine. So, beautiful. Great. Okay, so we now have our second table. Now we're going to save that table. We're going to call it T tags, small t for table, tags. Okay, so we now have our two tables. And the last thing I want to do today is we're going to do our relationships. Okay, so everyone get out your dating apps. Kidding. Or am I? Relationships. Okay, so we're going to pull out our two tables here. So far this is looking pretty simple. Here's our two tables. We can see we've got all of our information here, all of our information here. Those are the different things we have. So now what I want to do is I want to create the relationship between the transaction IDs. So all I'm going to do in Access, drag this over, and it's like, oh, hey, look, two transaction IDs. Do we want to reinforce referential integrity? Absolutely, we want to. Reinforcing the referential integrity is integral to a relationship. Now, back to Access. Basically, all that means is that we're just going to be double checking things all the time, and the database is going to do all that in the background. So that's all good. So we're going to create our connection. Could not lock the tags table because it's open, because I'm dumb and need to close it. So we're going to do that. And we're going to close the transaction table, and then we're going to try to do this again. Drum roll, please. Great. Boom. Okay. So one thing you'll notice right here is you see 1, and then you see the infinity symbol. So this is the table that follows Yahweh, the one true God, and this is the table that follows the multitude of gods of Egypt, as per the version of the Ankh there. No. The Ankh is a bit of an infinity symbol, but that's a whole nother story. I'm just going to move myself down here if you guys don't mind. Thank you. So what that means is it's a one-to-many relationship. So that means that this table will only ever have one transaction ID, but this table can have many. So one here will reference to many here, one-to-many relationship. So again, nothing game-breaking here, but it's just how those are going to work. So I am 4 minutes from an hour. I'm getting thirsty because I've been talking for the last little while, but I appreciate you hanging in there, Mom. So yeah, that's the start of the budgeting program. So as you can see, it takes a lot longer than an Access, but once we've gotten further, once we're done, you're going to see the level of power that we have with a system like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this guy. We're going to close it up, and I'm going to pick this up again on another day, and we'll just get